Welcome to the Grow Renaissance podcast. Let's nourish the world.
All right, welcome back to Pasture Prime Time. I'm your host, Neil Smith, in case you've forgotten since the last episode. And as always, we're talking through one conversation, one story at a time, right at the roots of regenerative agriculture in the world. Today, I'm joined by Bill O'Neill from AgWise.io. Again, that's AgWise.io, a platform that's bringing agriculture into the real world, not just a platform for the boardroom. This is integration, helping farmers understand their data, make better decisions. And again, we're going to be pulling the thread on how this platform really is supporting beyond the yield and making impact. We're also going to be talking about regenerative agriculture, the agriculture market space as a whole, and where we can measure and scale our shared collective knowledge. And why the future of ag tech might not just be about telling better stories, but should be about how we start at the farm and really truly cultivate technology through all pieces of operational outputs that we have. So Bill, I'm really excited to have you here on the show. Welcome. I'd love to hear first and foremost, your journey all the way up to AgWise.io and sort of what led you into this opportunity as a co-founder for this platform.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Neil, thank you. Thanks for giving me the time to tell you a little bit about AgWise and what we do. And as far as how we got here, that's a great story. I still sometimes shake my head and figure out how the heck this 30-year meathead, which is what I refer to myself as, ended up starting a technology company with my wife, Sara Martello, a few years ago. But anyway, as I said, I've been in the protein industry in the U.S. for over 30 years. All of that really has been spent on niche items, not commodity, not I've never really sold just fresh beef or pork or whatever, but instead I tried to be involved in what's next within those industries. And for example, back in the early 90s, we had a startup company in Western New York State called Fairbank Farms, and myself and Randy Huffman, we spent some time over in London and working with Tesco and with St. Mary's Meats, who was a major supplier to Tesco, to learn case ready and to case ready meat, which at the time, in 1991, 92, nothing was done in the U.S. No ground beef, nothing was done. Maybe poultry had started, some of that, but anyway, Randy and I spent a fair amount of time over there, and in between going to the pubs and whatnot, we actually did learn quite a bit about case ready, brought it back to the U.S. and ended up doing business with two significant retailers and bringing a whole case ready setup, not just ground beef, but the entire beef, pork, poultry was, as I said, was already there, but all the cuts, some value added products like sausages and whatnot. But we did that. And then later on, actually, towards the end of the 90s, I got involved in the fully cooked business. And again, this was before that category existed. I worked with HEB in Texas and Molly McAdams, who was the first fully cooked category manager in the country, in the U.S. The category did not exist. Steve Harper, who headed up perishable, or headed up meat, I should say, for HEB, it was really his vision. He saw that convenience was going to be important to consumers, hired Molly out of, I bet, NCBA, I think, out of Denver, whatever. She didn't know anything about retail, but she's incredible. She's a meat scientist, but she's an incredible marketer, it turns out. Well, anyway, so worked with her, and we were pretty successful in that. And then later on, and I guess I understand now how I got into what we're doing now. Later on, I was part of a company called Advanced Brands, and Advanced Brands. This is in maybe 2001 or so. We started it,
Right.
startup, but it was a JV between Advanced Food Company out of Enid, Oklahoma,
Mm-hmm.
and Cargill,
Okay.
neither of whom really were focused on retail from a fully cooked meat standpoint.
Yep.
So they came together, created this company called Advanced Brands, and myself and three other guys were the, I guess, originators or the founders or the officers of that company. So we started in, and again, strictly focused on retail and frozen, fully cooked, but doing all the products from burgers to fajitas to poultry, beef, pork, all of it.
Right on.
And we were pretty successful. I mean, we were real successful, and grew that business to 100 million relatively quickly, like in 3, 4, or 5 years, something like that. But and this was the key point for me, Neil, is that I think it was probably around year 7. We had bruises on our back because we kept patting ourselves on the back so much, and we went into a quarterly board meeting and suddenly found out that the board was not as impressed with us as we were. And what they basically said was, "You guys are great at growing top line, but
Mm-hmm.
you suck at growing the bottom line. And if you can't, I mean, at that point, we were probably $150 million a year business, and we were probably stuck on $13 million in EBITDA margin. And they were like, yeah, I mean, quit growing the top, grow the bottom. And I remember walking out of that meeting with my three colleagues, and we probably went to the nearest bar, and which I'm sure we did. And we sat there, looked at ourselves, and said, "Now what the hell do we do? I mean, are we just a one-trick pony who can just grow sales? I
Yeah.
mean, because we're all salesmen, and that's what we wanted to do. And that's how people, whatever. So, but this is the point, is that in the next 2 years, we probably went from, if I said it was 150, we probably grew it to 185 or 200 million. But that 13 million bottom line,
Yeah.
more than doubled in
Wow.
2 years.
Wow.
And it was because we quit focusing as much on the top line. We still grew top line because we're salesmen,
Yep.
but man, we made decisions about the bottom line, and it was a game changer for me to look at that. And now I fast forward to, how did I get here? And and I think that that's what AgWise is really about. Again, everybody, Neil, everybody talks about their farm management platforms and yada
Yep.
yada, and all of these companies have, all of us in this ag tech world have our platforms. And I'd like to refer to ours more as an operational intelligence hub that just keeps pulling in information, not just to house it like a when I think of a platform, I think, it's a database. You're housing the
Yep.
data, but more importantly, it's to make operating decisions from the information that you're pulling in. So we create tools like Foliar Script or Haney AI or whatever it may be. And we take that information, and by doing it, we give that farmer um, a significant savings in nutrient usage or whatever it may be, in fertilizer. Um, but at the same time, we're gathering information. And at the
Yep.
end of the year, hopefully that farmer can go ahead and take a look at the actual results, and make decisions. The other thing I'd say is our hub, if as a customer of ours, if in January you give us 3 pieces of information, you tell us your zip code, the seed
Mm-hmm.
number that you're planting, and give us your the date that you plan to plant. And our operational hub will basically lay out for you exactly what's going to take place during that production year. So here's your entire year's production plan laid out with the milestones associated with when that corn pops out of the soil, and then all the other milestones that we're predicting, basically.
Yeah.
Um, all those other milestones and what nutrients are going to be needed and all of that, so that the farmer then can plan exactly what is going to take place. And then, as I say, we've got these other tools that you can use during that production process.
Yeah.
But at the end of the year, now we take, how did we actually do? And Neil, what I'm getting to is I'm not worried about your yield, and I know that's gonna, nobody's gonna like to hear that. I'm much more worried about your profit. And if I can make your field more
Yeah.
profitable, if I can help you make your acreage more profitable, then we're successful. And that's what AgWise is about. It's about that. And the more we do, the more information we get, the better that data is going to be, so that farmer can make real decisions that are profitable. And think about it, Neil. If if you do this for several years, and now you've got maybe it's a 300, 400 acre deal, but it's a profitable business. Now you've got something either to pass on or to sell, but
Yeah.
it's based on bottom line, and you'll get whatever multiple you're getting out of that. But actually turning that farm into a business, that's what AgWise is about.
I love it. I love it. One of the things that really caught my attention was, you know, going beyond vague recommendations, which we see far too often, at least from my perspective, in a lot of technology that's out there. Um, on your foliar side, or your prescriptive, your cropping system information, you're actually getting into the different reproductive stages and vegetative stages, and you're giving detailed information there. I thought that was really really interesting. it, do you move into the cattle industry at all with this? Do you get, I mean, you came from proteins, is this something that you've moved across into livestock or into the cattle industry at all?
Yeah, so Neil, we've stuck our toe into it. A year ago, um, a commodity trader by the name of Jamie Kohake,
Okay.
who is a fairly well-known commodity trader, came to us and asked us to work on a one-off. Basically, could you create software to help me create my platform, but a commodity trading platform around, I think he had 7 or 8 commodities that he wanted included in that, one of which was cattle. And as I said to you, I'm a meathead. I love meat. I love still being involved in that. But and so we did that. But then as a offshoot of that, we created a cattle hedging tool.
Hmm.
And again, everything that we do, Neil, is really focused on small and mid-sized farmers. That's our target.
Right.
That's who we want to help with all of these tools. And what I've learned is that, especially with those cow calf operators or ranchers or backgrounders, and not to mention feeders, but feeders as well, your smaller feeders, hedging is like, I mean, that is like scary business.
Yeah.
And yet, if you think about it today, I don't know how the hell you're in that business if you're not hedging, if you're
Yeah.
not, because you could lose it all with this market the way it is in a heartbeat. So we created this tool. So in working with Jamie, and we're actually, it's it's surprising to me. It shouldn't be, but it's surprising to me that the traction that we're actually getting on that. So
It's amazing.
that's it. But I'll say there are, what I learned, Neil, there's several great companies out there that are doing what we're focused on in land. They're doing it and providing that analytical information on the livestock side. I'm talking about like performance livestock analytics, Cattlenomics, Cattler, Balance Forward. There's several of these
Yeah.
analytic companies that are focused on livestock, and they can do exactly what you were talking about, what we're doing for crops, for corn, for soybean, for wheat, for whatever. They're doing that. They've got that cornered. And I'm so again, I think that our main focus is going to be on the land side, but in order ultimately, what I want to do, and it gets back to my roots, is deliver. If I could deliver a steak or ground beef or a pork chop or whatever it may be to the retail case, so that that consumer can pick that product up and scan it and actually see the real information. You mentioned something about a story earlier. It's not just a story. I mean, this ain't fiction. This is a real deal. That's what I want to do. So you've got to be somewhat involved
Yeah.
on both sides of this thing in order to make it work. And again, if you're a cattleman, um, and if you're going to sell a regenerative product or whatever it may be, whatever unique attribute you're trying to
Yeah.
market and get a premium for, then that you're going to want to know what that cattle ate,
Yep.
and the feed that went into it and the medications that went, all of that. So again, that information has got to be gathered, and we can provide that information when it comes to on the feed side. And again, all of this, I don't care if it's cattle or if it's corn, soybean, wheat, whatever it is, it all comes from that soil.
Yep.
And we've got to tell the story of healing that soil, really making it better through tools and techniques. And
Yep.
so that's that. I
Yeah.
don't know if I answered your question, but that's
No, you're speaking my language. I mean, I spend, as you know, a lot of time in soil rehabilitation. You know, the end state would obviously be a regenerative state that we move into. And I think it's important to talk about livestock. That's why I asked, you know, as much as we're talking about land transformations and the commodity crops that we're growing and, you know, how we're starting to shift the system a little bit. And maybe that goes into a good question that I tend to ask a lot of my guests, which is, you know, from your perspective, what's working really well in our agriculture market today? And then conversely, I'm going to ask, you know, what isn't working so well from your perspective? But let's start with the positive. You know, what's working really well in the agriculture community or market space is probably the better
so.
point.
And well, if you're in the cattle business, that's working well today, given the market prices and whatnot. If you're
Yeah,
growing crops and looking at the market, it's like, oh my God. I mean, how could anybody sell this corn at three? I don't know what the market is today, but if it's 380 or $4 or whatever, it's like, how do you ever make a profit at that? But I'll say this, that a few years ago when I went to my first regenerative soil, right in your expertise, you know, there was probably 20, 25 farmers in the room, in the big conference room. And now when I go to those, there's probably 250 of those
yeah,
farmers in that room. And I think that tells you, I don't know if it's out of desperation or what, but I think that farmers are really looking for an alternative. And again, we all talk about how old the average farmer is and whatnot. But I mean, there are younger guys getting in, and I
hmm
just got off the phone this morning with one from Minnesota, um, who I think he has like a 375 acres that he's taking over from his dad.
yeah,
And all he said to me was, it doesn't pencil out. I mean, what we've done in the past, it just doesn't pencil. Um,
yeah,
and that's why he's interested in some of the tools that we're using in that hub that I talked about, especially from a production planning standpoint. I can
yeah,
lay out my entire year and see not only here's what I'm planning, but at the end, here's what actually happened. So just like a real business, you analyze it at the end, say, okay, where did we come up, what
Yeah.
really worked, and where did we come up short? So I'm encouraged by the turnout that we're getting at regenerative conferences and meetings. Um, and again, I'd like, and I'm an old guy, but I like having the next generation get involved because they're much more critical thinking than maybe my generation or past generations
Yeah.
when it comes to that.
Just new perspectives where technology is sort of ingrained in the mindset already. And, how do we leverage that? The newer generation has that curiosity of, how do we enable technology? We don't have to learn it. We understand it. And how do we enable it more effectively? So I appreciate that. And I would say, the challenge, some people feel it's out of desperation that these changes need to happen at the farm. I think it's more akin to the young farmer that you were talking to, which is uh, there's just a lot more thought on how to, and I talk about it from how do we diversify our balance sheet so that there's more resiliency regardless of what we're growing or raising, and not being so dependent on commodity prices and the market dictation.
Yep.
Um, Also, so we can open up new market spaces. These grain farmers that are only going to terminal and are very dependent on that commodity market space, certainly are beholden to what's going on there. And in a year like this year, the numbers may not pencil out the same way they did 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and
Right.
um, and we need to move away from that into creating more resilient. And I always I buffer the word regenerative because I think it's being overused. We'll just
Sure.
leave it at that. It's being overused. But building resilient systems within your operations takes into account on how do you create diversity on your balance sheet. When we're talking about it on the land, you're talking about the data you use in how do you create that land planning, land management scenario today, and then at the end of the
Yep.
year for analysis. It's just diversity. Where's the elasticity? What's the playroom that we have to play with, and hopefully that keeps expanding. So there's a little more breathing room between the collar and the neck there for each and every farmer.
Yeah. I think the key. I think the key for whether it's you're selling corn or whether you're selling beef or any of these products, I think what we have to do is to hook that producer up with the consumer. And I'm not talking about just your typical website kind of thing. I'm saying we've got to get the retailer
Yeah.
involved. And if you can find a retailer who really values,
Mm-hmm.
more nutritious crops or beef, and knowing exactly how this was produced, we've got to find a retailer who buys into that, and then help create the supply chain. And that retailer's got to be willing to pay a little bit more, or that brand has got to be willing to pay a little bit more. That's the thing. When we started this AgWise, which originally was called Wise Up Food, when we started it, my dream was simply to let's slap a QR code on the package, tell the story, yada yada yada, boom. And there were a couple problems with that. Obviously, I was
Yeah.
very naive. That supply chain really didn't exist. I mean, it was so fragmented, and nobody trusted or cared or any of that. But ultimately, it came down to, okay, this is wonderful. Who the hell's going to pay for this? I mean, who's
Mm-hmm.
going to pay for it? And
Mm-hmm.
today, and I just was asked this question 2 weeks ago by a retailer, and my answer is the brand. Whatever brand is selling that product is going to pay the extra, whatever that premium is, slight or maybe more than slight, whatever. The brand is going to pay that because that's the cost of doing business. That's the cost of creating differentiating that product so that you can sell it to the consumer for more. So that's, if we can get there, now the producer has leverage that
Yeah.
that he or she hasn't ever really had. If you're talking in the States with the in the beef business, I mean, it's the packer. The packer controls all of that. Um, and if you're talking outside of that, again, big ag and big food and big pharma and all, they control that. And the last thing they want is somebody screwing this system up, and actually having a consumer understanding exactly where this product came from. There's a company called Ribbon Wire Ranch. And Doug and Chad they're just the greatest people in the world. And it's organic. It's the
Mm,
largest organic beef ranch in the country.
mm,
Started working with them several years ago. And again, Doug handles all the crop on his side. Chad handles the beef and the cattle on his side. But again, giving them over the last few years to watch them from being complete price takers to now working with Wegmans,
mm-hmm.
and their Ribbon
Nice.
Wire Ranch beef is
Yeah.
now selling in Wegman stores, and to watch their organic beef sticks on Amazon and other platforms. It's like it is incredible to watch the transformation of price taker to price maker to a certain extent, and all that information that is in between they control. And
Yes.
that's, if we can do that for more
Yes.
producers, we've really got something. And again, the
Absolutely.
current system, that's the last thing the current system wants to see happen. But man, once we do it, it's a powerful tool, and it really will help producers be more profitable, which again, that needs to be the end result. And what you had mentioned earlier, the layering, if you
Yeah.
can diversify your income streams, if you can layer in additional stuff, and you can do that with some of the new technologies. I'm not talking about AgWise as much as, but like the new technologies that you have using digesters in your systems and things like that.
Yeah.
I spent time with a company called Bion Environmental Technologies, and Bion was all about putting that feeding deal into slatted floor barns, collecting that waste, and then and processing that waste. And again, that feeder and others in that supply chain then would get a cut of that revenue. And you just layer that on top of your meat, on top of, you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying. But
Yeah.
that's the power of this deal if we can and when we get there.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, the creating this circular economy, and what you're indicating really is it's driven by data. Data-driven decisions are allowing us to make those informed decisions on how we can then create different enterprises off of our operations, and how do we have a more closed loop system from start to finish. And whether that is, real world asset products that we're talking about, the sludge, or the byproducts, biodigesters being one of them. Vermiculture pits, cryolysis machines. The list goes on and on. But we can take that as well to creating closed loop systems in terms of delivery of market space. And I love that idea of bringing consumers closer to farmers. That's one of the things that we do. It's one of the reasons you and I started to get to talk and getting to know each other prior to this discussion here on Pasture Prime Time. It's that whole idea that consumers need to know their farmers, but they also just need to better understand the environments of which we're growing and raising um, our food, the base food, before processing, and where it comes from. And I think that the other piece in there that you mentioned is engaging retailers, and I might sit on the other side of the fence on this, because I think one of the holdups in engaging retail or grocer is the fact that everyone wants to charge more. And we're in a economy right now where the consumer isn't necessarily shopping by nutritional factor; they're shopping by dollar value. When they go into their grocery store, they go into Amazon, they go to their, food delivery box system. We all would love shop nutritionally. But often it is priced, just beyond that, cognitive desire and, the cheaper discounts and volume. And so how do we get retail and grocers and even farmers just providing better quality food with data that we can trust at a similar price as we can access other food? Because that's where we really start to imbalance the current system that's there. And I understand, from the farm operations as an owner operator myself, I fully understand, I buy into everything you're saying about, creating that bottom line elasticity, diversifying that balance sheet, and really understanding how to run a business. And that means increasing, your premiums. But I think there's ways and mechanisms of which we can engage the secondary layers, the third layers, and that would be, your distribution, your supply chain as a whole, all the way through to consumer, without having to increase the price so much that it pushes it out of the consumer's cognitive ability or desire. There's a tipping point. There's certainly a tipping point, and doesn't mean we can't increase pricing. But, we need to find ways of which that desire to shop nutritionally and also have that price point be value added for the consumer, that is really going to exponentially shift our industry and backtrack that all the way through the supply chain back to the farm.
Yeah. So again, my knee-jerk answer is you've got to find the right retailer, whether that's a Wegmans, as I mentioned before, who they're one of the best in the world, is in my opinion, or a Sprouts, or more of a niche focused. Not that Sprouts is niche; they're big, but you know what I'm saying, or a Whole Foods or whatever. But the other thing that came into my head, and by the way, think about this, Neil. If we created a value chain based on the nutrient density and where that was created, the farmer would obviously get a big cut of that, because that soil and that crop are what is generating the protein, the nutritiousness that lead either into the animal or lead directly to the case in the store. But it's a paradigm shift. It's a complete change in it. When you were saying that, I had this flashback to what I was talking about when we started, and that is the case ready meat business. And it was a really hard sell in the U.S. And the reason it was, I mean, you shifted the labor paradigm completely. You no longer needed the butchers and the meat cutters and the whatever. I think that's why we got a fair amount of death threats, especially from New York City during that time. I mean, it was the craziest. I would get calls at home on a Sunday just saying, "Hey, you need to not bring in another load of that product into New York City." I mean, it was so. But the thing is, the retailers eventually started to see, holy cow, I'm looking at the bottom line. This could really make sense from a CENTS. This could make a lot of sense for us. But now, how do I get there? Because am I selling? So this ground beef is case ready. This ground beef is not case ready. And I'm telling you that this one is safer. It's packed in a USDA plant, yada, yada, yada. It's leak proof. It's all of these benefits. So is this unsafe product?
Right.
And that's what retailers really grappled with. It's like, how the hell do I message this change to my customers? And what I was thinking was, so do I have produce or meat? This is really high in nutrients. This is extra, and we could call out what those are. Well, how does that compare to what's sitting over there in that case? If you follow what I'm saying, I think that's the tough part. That, and again, I come back to, you've got to find a retailer who is really committed to doing this and to delivering this. And again, I keep saying, at least at the start, it will be more of a niche, and you're going to have to deal with a
Yeah.
niche retailer like a Whole Foods or like a Sprouts or like a whoever that may be. Greenwise here in Florida with Publix, but it's somebody who really values that nutrient density. And
Yeah.
believe me, I am all in on us getting there. I really
Yeah.
think that that's the way uh, food should be sold, is based
Totally.
on nutrient density, and we've got the technology to be able to do that. Um, we just have to grow the courage and in the supply chain to actually do that.
Yeah. And I think it's partly one of the reasons that Grow is so mission driven to really bring these conversations to the table and be a facilitator of trust and transparency, to enable that courage, not just to be something of a leap of faith, but be something that is pragmatically driven on, an equal playing field, and call that, the immutability of data that is irrefutable. It is what it is, and it's driving those decision outcomes that we can package. You can store it, analyze it, monetize it in all different ways. But we really need to be able to have a source of truth that is telling that documentary or that story. I understand the piece there you mentioned about story, but that the real journey to get up to that point. And it's why I'm so encouraged with platforms like AgWise. I've long held the belief that we need more decentralized mind thinking, which means we have to work more collaboratively together, right? We don't need to own uh, all pieces of the pie. And I think, you mentioned that in your fact that you built this CattleWise platform, and there's already terrific people out there doing that. And so, what pieces do you bring of value that could integrate into that? And I look at AgWise
Right.
to what Grow is doing, and I'm going, is there a way for you to build on top of our platform, to double the output opportunity, call it trust or transparency or expedition of, servicing those different conversations, and really to push that courage. Uh, and it's an exciting time, because you're absolutely right. We have the technology. It's how do we think about being more collaborative or decentralized? We're working more together. One it's a non-ag term, but one tide raises all ships kind of mindset. But that's what we need, and I think that's how we're going to get that paradigm shift to really start to catch fire.
Yeah. So, and I think I've shared this with you before, but um, my co-founder at AgWise, Sara Martello, she is a Bitcoin nut. When I met her 7 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever it was, she basically introduced me to it. And when we started down this road, as I said, we had this vision, and she was all about, and still is all about blockchain. That if you're really going to deliver a differentiated product that today's consumer, but even more importantly, tomorrow's consumer, is going to just expect that whatever you're saying about this product, you can back it up. And in order to do that, you've got to have that blockchain. You've got to be able to show and tell exactly where this came from without any of the the shifting and the smoke and mirrors of the old days.
Yeah.
It's got to be real. And again, I always like to say when um, Steve Jobs talked about Henry Ford, and if about
Yeah.
you've got to, but Steve was saying you got to build products. You can't ask customers what products they want. You got to figure out what's next, and then you got to build it. Because if Henry Ford had asked customers, what do you want? They would have said faster horses,
Yeah.
instead of a Model A or Model T or whatever the hell he built. And I think the same thing is true here. We're talking about Gen Zers, but and Gen Z is one that, but the next generation, what you and I love and what we really want to bring, it's going to be the price of admission. Either you do this or you're going to get burned. And as you and I know, once somebody does it, everybody has to do it. I mean, it's going to be like, oh God, okay, we'll be dragged kicking and screaming, but we're going to have to do it. And that's, again, that's my goal. That's my vision, is to be able to put this whole supply chain together in a way that delivers really differentiated product that is completely substantiated. I mean, no,
Yeah.
I've watched grass-fed beef get sold in the U.S. that it's not grass-fed.
Yeah.
It's bullshit, and that's what people that's what industries have been accustomed to.
Yeah.
But man, I think the next gen consumer is not gonna take kindly to that.
Yeah. And I think we're starting to see ripple effects of that happening, throughout the nation, certainly the lower 48, even up into Canada, um, where consumers of the younger generations are, looking to shop more locally, looking to have, the connection with farms that are within a radius. You name that radius, it changes a little bit from region to
Right.
region. Um, they want to better understand. They're not so driven by gluttony. They're also not in these, big, diet systems, or their lives are different. They operate different than when I grew up, and I'm not that old, but um, it's a different way of living today, just because of how technology's already impacted their nature. I mean, no longer are the younger generations going to a job from 8 a.m. to 5 or 9 to 5. They're by and large a generation, and it's probably the last two generations, that are all outsourced. They've got 5 or 6 different opportunities, or gigs as they like to call them, that are allowing them to scratch a living. And that's changing the way they think, and that's changing the way that they operate in terms of the consumerism as well. I mean, it doesn't have to be food, and that's what you and I focus on, but it could be
Yeah.
anything, right? The shirts, the apparel, um, and they're asking more questions. And I really encourage them to continue to push those questions, because it's enabling you and I to do what we're trying to do, which is actually take those questions and create the new systems that need to be built, the new supply chain from field to shelf. Um, but along the way, ensuring people are still building business opportunities, farmers building different enterprises, supply chain having different capabilities. And it's just taking the blinders off. We have to stop doing things the old way. I was talking to somebody about a pack house just recently, and they said, oh, you'll never change them. They've got their efficiency set, and you'll never change. And I said, well, why not? Like, have we had the conversation with the pack house about changing their processes? Um, and by the way, why does changing processes mean we lose efficiency? And why can't we push the buttons on what we're doing? Clearly, what we're doing isn't working upstream and downstream. It may work in different segments for a period of time, but upstream to downstream, the whole system doesn't work smoothly.
I think the biggest, I wish I was younger. I wish I was, I've got a friend who works for Tees, who now is going to be owned by Cargill outright. But I wish I was Griffin, because the marketing opportunity that is out in front of, that's the beef industry, but out in front of any of these products, it's incredible to me right now, because it's all going to be personalized.
Yeah,
I mean, we're going to, you're talking about that next gen consumer. It's all of this stuff is going to be personalized for that
yeah,
individual's diet, for that individual's whole bio, whatever. And
yeah,
I'm excited as heck about that. I think it just opens up major opportunities to be able to dial in on what that diet for a certain individual needs to be. And again, um, the opportunity presented, in my opinion, by like the GLP-1s right now,
yeah,
and the fact that what a change that makes in somebody's relationship to food.
yeah,
It is a, and again, I don't know if it's a fad, or but it changes your relationship to food, and suddenly you can't consume that 16-ounce steak or maybe even an 8-ounce steak, and you're going to be, it's up to us to be able to put those products together. So it's 2 ounces but it's not just a beef stick. And I'm not yelling about beef stick. I mean, I'm all for them. I love them.
Yeah.
I eat the heck out of them. But it's you. There's so many cool products that you could make now in 2 ounces and 3 ounces and 4 ounces and so on. That's what needs to happen. And I really I can't believe what it's going to look like 10 years from now. I think it's so exciting. I really do. But it comes back to you need all that information,
Yes.
which is what AgWise is we create tools and that those tools gather information. They help that farmer focus on profit instead of top line. It's bottom line.
Yeah.
Um, but in the meantime, now if you combine what you're doing with what we're doing, and now you can deliver that, and it's a completely differentiated product, and it's specific for what your needs are. Now you've got a winner. Now you've got
Yeah.
an incredible deal. You're gonna walk in your local grocery store, and your watch is going to alert you that you need to, as you're walking by the bananas, that you need to pick up 2 bananas because you're low in whatever potassium or whatever they have. Or the same thing in the meat case. You're going to get alerted that you need to pick up 4 ounces of this. That's what I see down the road in the not too distant future because the technology is all here.
Yeah.
So anyway.
We're so Grow Blockchain is got some really strong connections with a few other wonderful projects, and one of them is really leading the charge on this new frontier of Web4, which is really AI-enabled blockchain, and that impact platform where you're working with a twin of yourself that's sort of working to keep you on track and as you said, customize. And I like you, I think it's fascinating, it's exciting. Um, and it's something to lean into and not pull away from, because I think we need to really just explore the capabilities of it. And it starts with Web3 and understanding that, and it's moving quickly into this Web4, which is this AI-driven sort of build
Yeah,
upon
that's
Web3. So
exciting.
yeah,
It's really exciting.
we're getting near to the end of this episode, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's nice to have encouraging and exciting conversations, and I really allow these dialogues to sort of flow naturally, and just pull the threads. One of the things I always like to do is just sort of open the floor and have you share about anything that's happening in your local community or any events that you're going to be at. Tell our audience that's listening and watching globally what might be going on with AgWise, where they might find you, where you're next going to be speaking, or what kind of podcasts or webinars you might be hosting.
Yeah, so we try and stay as involved as we can. And again, we're based here in St. Petersburg, Florida. Um, so we're very much involved in the community here, and Sarah, thankfully, does a lot of those presentations, and she does a lot better than I do at those. But obviously, we attend uh, the tech hub. Uh, Conferences and we've got the progress show coming up. I forget exactly when that is, but I mean we like to attend those, but really like to attend those and really try and zero in again, get targeted on potential customers who are going to be
Yeah,
attending those. So um, but we will be at at most or all of those as we move forward and
great.
keep trying to again create some, I think, unique analytical tools that solve specific problems that are facing small and mid-sized farmers. That's what our deal is about. And at those types of shows that at Progress or whatever,
Yeah,
that's where we hear quite often a farmer will come up, look at foliar, look at Haney, look at the cattle hedge, look at some of these, and then say, what if? Have you ever thought of this? And honestly, Neil, that's foliar script is the brainchild of Russell Hedrick. North Carolina farmer,
Yeah.
who is like one of the best regenerative farmers that in the country, if not the world. The guy's one of the smartest guys I knew, first generation farmer. And this guy has, I mean, he really dials in, and it's all about profit. It's all
Right.
about what's my soil doing. So again, out of these different sessions or out of these different meetings, conferences, we hope to find more Russell Hedricks, or Jamie Cohakes or Rick Haney's, who, hey, we've got this idea. How do we go about really creating software around this that could really help the big community? So that's what we'll keep doing that.
Amazing. Amazing. And so for our audience listening, I just want to, again, underline agwise.io. If you're interested in that platform, go check
Yes.
it out. Catch them at all the shows, the Farm Progress shows Bill's mentioned. And if you're a farmer or a rancher anywhere in the globe right now, and you're interested, you can either go to the website to connect with Bill and his team. You can come through myself, and I'll make sure to connect you. But certainly, if there's some interest, don't hesitate to reach out and explore and have conversations. As you've heard, it's about exploratory conversations. It's not about pushing a product. It's about aligning so that we can build better operations and start to fix that whole supply chain all the way down to the consumer. Bill, it's been a real pleasure. I look forward to further conversations in the future as AgWise is growing and expanding, and potentially our collaborations that we have in discussion. But more so, I look forward to working alongside you in this wonderful market space that we get to work in called agriculture. So thank you.
Absolutely. Neil, I really appreciate the time. I enjoyed the discussion. It's good. I like, as you, I like folks that are looking forward. And just as I did way back in the early days, I love trying to figure out what's next and how to play in that and be a player and help make that come to be. So anyway,
Amazing.
no, I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. All right, everyone. We'll catch you on the next episode of Pasture Prime Time. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Grow Renaissance podcast. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe this episode. Remember, it will take a community of us to do the best in the world and truly nourish not only ourselves, but the planet, the atmosphere, the soil, the plants, and the animals on it. So make sure you spread this message anywhere that you can.